Shalom, good morning. This is Avraham Shira for Nar Shalom and the Chabura. This morning, as you can see from the title of our shiur, Rape, Spiritual Profiling, and the Mixed Multitude, we are entering into very difficult territory. The Zohar is going to give us a story that appears in a whole bunch of Zohars about the mixed multitude that attached themselves to the Israelites when they came out of Egypt. And suddenly, in the mixed context of all these different Torahs about the mixed multitude, which were from the Egyptians chiefly, but other nations that attached themselves to the Jewish people and to Moses when they came up out of Egypt, suddenly we have a story of two rabbis that experienced something rather tragic and difficult to see. Good morning, David. Good morning to everyone. Hi, Ariel. So we're beginning on the Sefer Zohar on Parshat Beshalach with the paragraph Patach Rabbi Yitzchak ve'amar Al titchar mere'im maman mere'im delo ketiv hata'im v'rasha'im ela mere'im. So the first, the Zohar starts out with a classic linguistic question on a pasuk from King David. Don't be vexed. I like that word vexed. It's a little old-fashioned. By those who do evil. Don't be vexed by those who do evil. Now, most of us get a lot of vexation going on when we watch the news and see the kind of things that people are doing to each other in the world. King David says, don't be vexed. Maninu Mere'im, the Zohar asks, who are these Mere'im? Why aren't they called sinners or evil people, but rather from the Lashon Re'im, a Re'ah is a friend. Now, of course, Ra is evil itself, but it's a play on both words. And they do evil to themselves. We're getting the answer. The specific detail of this word is the people that do bad to themselves, and it causes bad to those who are attached to them. In other words, there are people that go out and do evil to others, and they do very good to themselves, and they know how to live. And then there are people that do evil to themselves that don't bother anybody else. But then there are those people who do evil to themselves, and anybody attached to them seems to get the flack from what they've done. So it's an interesting distinction in the language that King David uses. Rabbi Yehuda says, Mere'im harchek garmecha me'mere'im. Rabbi Yehuda says, distance yourself from these people. That friends and evil people should not be attached together. That they will not cause our good deeds or to become bad deeds, and that we will not be trapped or caught by their bad deeds. In other words, if you're a good person and you have some friends who are not such good people, you can get caught in their net, depending on what they're doing and where you are at any given time. So if I'm hanging out with the wrong people and something bad happens to me, I could say it's not my fault, but I could also say, what am I doing there if I know these people, I mean, the classic situations usually nowadays are you have friends that are doing things that you yourself wouldn't do, but you kind of still hang out with them. And I think most of you know what I mean. Okay, so that's the first paragraph. Tachazeh, come and see that if it was not for the Erev Rav, had not attached themselves to Yisrael, lo itaved ha'u ovadah, that if the Erev Rav had not attached themselves to the Jewish people would never have made the golden calf, which is considered the most serious offense that the Israelites committed when they came out of Egypt. And it goes on to tell us that the Jews would not have died. Kol inun demitu, those that were killed in the punishment of the golden calf. There are thousands of people lost their lives in the wake of the golden calf. And they would have caused other evil things to happen to the Jews. And this particular offense of serving and dancing with the golden calf and all the things that represented, and usually idol worship always includes illicit relations, that the Jews would never have gone into exile in the first place. Now, we're also told that once the Torah was given, the Jews would achieve eternal life in this world. Let's see what it says. The Tanukh, at the time that Moses came down with the 10 Commandments, God wanted to find the Jews at the level of the upper angels, not human beings, people that were completely divorced from any evil whatsoever. When a person is completely good, he's actually higher than the angels because he's converted his free choice into the service of God. Mavad lahon cherin mikola, and they would have been freed from everything. That means all negative attachments in this world. And they would even have been freed from death. Now that's a hard one to believe, but when we look in the Torah and we see that people lived a very long time in the beginning of the narrative of the 5 books of Moses, we can understand a little bit more of the connection, why it says that when the Torah was given, the people returned to the level of Adam before the sin. That is, of course, Adam and Eve before the sin in the garden. That before they ate from the dubious apple, the metaphorical duality that introduced death into the mind and into the world, that the Jewish people returned to that level before the golden calf. And that means they would return to the level of the Garden of Eden, in which there was no death. There is no death in heaven, folks. It only happens down here. And they also would have been freed from the enslavement of other nations, as it is written, Harut ala luchot, al tikrei harut ela cherut, the famous rendition of the word for carving, the carved tablets. The word cherut is derived from there, the word for freedom. Right? And so, Harut became Cherut, that if a person would keep that carved 10 commandments, he would receive true freedom. And we know that the rabbis teach, Ein ben chorim ela ben Torah, that a person cannot really be free without the Torah, because there's too many attachments in this world. And only the Torah gives us that fine line pathway between all the things that this world offers, and what to do and when to do it and how much, etc. Okay. So we lost a lot when the golden calf was made. We lost the taste and the living in the level of Gan Eden. And because they did these sins, it caused all of what we've just spoken of, and enslavement to other kings, and we lost the first tablets, and of course death returned, and many died during this actual the punishment that was given to the people that worshiped the calf after Moses came down and broke the first tablets. And the Zohar is assigning responsibility. The Zohar is saying that it was because the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, who were not really from the children of Jacob who went down to Egypt, they were attached to the nation at a certain point in the Exodus story. Okay, this is probably not news for a lot of you, but there's a transition that takes place. That these people served idols and these people serve idols, as the angels told God, why are you saving them and not them? They served idols. And that's another discussion that we're going to have concerning Job, because Job was intimately involved in the story, but that'll have to be for another day. But nonetheless, God did save us, and yet the Erev Rav attached to us, and they brought with them this lust for gold and worshiping things like a calf, right? Like a calf, Like I can imagine, getting off a plane in India and seeing people bending down to a cow. It would be very hard not to laugh. Poor people. I mean, really, in the modern era. In the ancient era, it's a little more understood. But nonetheless, without bringing criticism on other cultures and their practices, we know that idol worship is the third commandment in the Torah. No, the second commandment, right? The first commandment in the Jewish 10 Commandments is, I am God. It's interesting that the Christian 10 Commandments erases that. They start with, you will not have other gods before me. So it's our second commandment. Now, why they erase the first commandment, I am God, is a very interesting theological question, and anybody wants to know, they can ask the Vatican. I'm not that interested. But nonetheless, we see when they came out, it says, Uv hacha begina home, because of them lo ikranum b'nei Yisrael, the Jews, golden calf, shraga, not Aleph, but I like the mistake, it's cute. The golden Aleph. That could be a good name for something. A rock band, I don't know. But nonetheless, the Jews were not called B'nai Yisrael, and they weren't even called Yisrael, velo ami, not even my nation, el am stam. They were just called the nation. They were not given the significance of their attachment to the Jewish people. Why, the Zohar says? Because they had the mixed multitude was attached to them. And so to speak, it changed the makeup of the people. And this begins our understanding of the idea that I call spiritual profiling. And we're going to go into it slowly. And I hope that we can do service to the concept and not lean left or right and not exaggerate towards one position or another. But as I said yesterday, that the Torah must cut the fine line right in the middle, because that's where truth is. Okay. And we see that the Zohar tells us that Gam Erev Rav Allah Itam. When the Torah tells us Itam, that means the Jewish people and the Erev Rav were mixed. Karelon Ha'am. And then they got that title that was less dignified, if you will. They were not called after the name of Jacob or Yaakov Yisrael. Okay, now the Zohar shifts gears completely. We have a little story. And this is a story, it might be difficult for some people to hear, but I believe it happened. And I believe that it happened to teach us something. And it was recorded by these great authors and students of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in order to teach us. Rabbi Yossi Yakshev Amar Ketiv Ki Asher Reitem Et Mitzrayim Hayom Lo Tisivlu Otam Od Arulam. And just as we were told that we're not going to be seen again in Egypt. And Rabbi Yitzhak and Rabbi Yehuda happened to be going on a path from a place called Usha, and they were going towards Lod. Now, the biblical names of places in Israel are not always corresponding to the present-day names of places. But these two places do exist in Israel today, Lod and Usha. Now, they were on the way. Okay, a fellow named Yossi, the merchant, was traveling along the same path with them. And he went with a team of camels. And he was running the camels. And they were carrying, of course, loads that the camels were used to carrying at the time. Now, as they were going along, Rabbi Yossi Ataya noticed a non-Jewish woman that was the Ketira Biroka Hakla, that she was picking herbs in a field. He saw this woman picking herbs in a field. He left them immediately. He left the rabbis and he went to the woman and he raped her. Now, the Zohar doesn't say that she didn't consent, but the context is very clear that it was not an appropriate thing to do. Okay? V'tohu. Tavu Rabbi Yitzchak v'Rabbi Yehuda. They were in shock, these two rabbis, to see such a thing out in the open in the middle of the day on a roadside and beside a field. He says, we better get off this road. Because God wanted to show us this. You see, when these people are at this level that halavai we could reach, where anything that happens to us, we understand God is trying to teach us something. He wants to show us not to get attached to this guy. Not to be attached to this person that they had formerly been going along the road with. So they went back, they left him on the road, they went back to the village that they had come from, they started asking questions, and they found out that this young man that had taken this woman, assumedly he raped her, perhaps he seduced her, but even seduction really is a form of rape if a person has a dominant position, mentality, charm, arrogance, etc., a lot of qualities that certain people like. I think you know what I'm talking about. So they went and checked on him, and they found out that his father was Jewish, but his mother was not Jewish, meaning that this young man was not Jewish. And his father had literally disqualified his own seed, or what the words mean. What that in the lexicon means is that he took the power of his Jewish soul and he put it in a place that God said, no, you shouldn't put your power there. You shouldn't give your power to a non-Jewish woman. Now, nowadays, this is a hard subject for a lot of people, especially secular Jews, people that have not been in the Torah world, people who have not spent the time to investigate the books and to understand the Jewish tradition. It's a difficult thing for a lot of people. And there are many levels of conversion, and there are many distinctions and arguments about all of that, but we're not really here to examine that today. What we want to understand is the relationships of these concepts with what we're going through today in terms of what I called spiritual profiling. And the rabbis end the paragraph, Rich Rachmana Deshe Zivlan. Blessed is God who saved us from all of this. Saved it from what? Well, saved them from attaching to what we just learned about, those types of evil people that do evil to others and cause evil to themselves and others by virtue of the attachment. Because such a person will do that. So anybody who just take a woman in the field that would probably also take your wallet and maybe your donkey and maybe your house or your wife, who knows? Because those things all go together. Now you could say, no, Avraham, it's not true. They're the different sins. It's true, they are different sins. But we know that Avera goreret Avera, that doing one sin creates the context to do more. And on even higher spiritual level, we create negative angels when we do negative things, and those negative angels come back for more. They're hungry. They want to get paid. They want more action. So we really have to really think long and hard before we actually choose our friends. And we got to know things, and we got to check things out. Now, when I first came to Israel and I was just newly religious, I didn't know how to check things out. I didn't know how to ask the right questions at the right time to the right people. And I made friends with all kinds of people. And I have to tell you, I suffered because of some of those choices. Today it's a little different, hopefully. And of course, I have a wonderful wife who helps me make choices like that. Why'd you bring him home? But really, we want to do good. And we are commanded by the Torah to love the stranger because we were strangers. And to love the converts because we are also essentially converts because of the the virtue of Abraham. The whole world was polytheistic before Abraham. Now, there were people, as we've said before, did believe in the one God concept, but they also believed in the multiple gods. So we all have to be converted to this idea that there really only is one power. All right. So with all those ideas said, where do we go from here? Now, what is spiritual profiling? Well, clearly, the rabbis saw this man and they went and checked him out and they found out he really wasn't Jewish, but he was apparently Jewish, acting Jewish, hanging out with Jews. Now, I've been in Jerusalem for 25 years, and almost every day you can see missionaries on the street. And they're not just regular missionaries. They call themselves Messianic Jews. And I've met many of them. And I find them, frankly, to be very friendly. They wear a kippah. They wear tzitzit. They look like Jews. They say nice things. They act friendly. And when you ask them if they're Jewish, there's that little, their eyes kind of go like that. They kind of blank out on you. And some of them say, yes, I'm Jewish. I accept the God of Jesus, of Abraham. But, if you ask a few more questions, they'll tell you, well, I still believe that JC is the Messiah. And you find out more as you ask more questions that they really belong to a Messianic church, but they want to take on these Jewish things. I grew up with Christians and I loved many Christians. Wonderful people. A good Christian is a good person. A good Muslim is a good person. So, what is this spiritual profiling? And why do the rabbis make a blessing that they were saved from this fellow? Because besides the fact that he could do other bad things to them, there is this profiling going on. And that's really part of what happened to the Jews when they came out of Egypt. They attached, the Erev Rav, the mixed multitudes, attached themselves to the Jewish people. And eventually they did do circumcision. And when they did circumcision, they were considered part of the Jewish people. But just doing circumcision is really not enough. It is one mitzvah. And it's a tough mitzvah. Maybe the hardest. For an adult especially. As we learned yesterday about Ishmael. But nonetheless, there are certain behaviors and practices that we talked about yesterday and today, like this golden calf, like bringing incense to demons that can give us information from the upper worlds, etc., what we call idol worship, which is really the occult, which is a form of necromancy, etc. We talked about that. Am I not allowed to profile that? Am I not allowed to ask the questions? Are you a Jew? I don't know. Recently, I had a guy came into the yeshiva, and he seemed very knowledgeable, and he told me that you shouldn't keep the bathroom this way, you should keep this differently, and it's not. And I looked at what he was talking about, some placing things in the bathroom. It was a little bit strange, right? And then we're starting to talk more, and he looks Jewish. He's got a kippah on. He, nice smile, a little beard. And I say, what's your name? And he says, Yeshua. Yeshua. Isn't that Jesus? Yes. I said, oh, that's an interesting name. So you're not Jewish. Well, he said to me, well, I'm Jesus. And he said, oh, really? And I knew what I was dealing with then, and, it was friendly conversation. And I tried to see to learn a little bit more about him, where you're from, how you got here, why are you here? And then I invited him to come sit and talk some more, have a cup of tea. Let's get to know each other, because all these people have a spark of something inside them driving them to Jerusalem, driving them to the streets of the holy city. They're looking for something. I've been on the streets of Jerusalem at night, and these guys with loudspeakers come out talking all this nice Torah about love and peace and harmony. And then of course, the last line is, and JC loves you. So they're missionaries. Okay, they're missionaries. Well, it happens to be that there's a law against missionizing in Israel. Oh, it also happens to be that they never enforce the law. Not ever I've heard of or seen. And I can also understand why they don't enforce the law. The largest industry in this country is tourism. And a huge percentage of the tourists that come to this country happen to be very religious Christians. Now, I'm not saying all those Christians missionize Jews. And a Christian is allowed to go out and try to find other people that want to be Christians. But in a Jewish country, on the Jewish streets that we fought for, that we died for, that we went to the Shoah for, I think there needs to be a little bit of distinction here. And that's another idea of spiritual profiling. And I confronted this one guy. It became a viral YouTube. You could probably find it. I don't even have it myself. Around 90,000 people went to see this YouTube because I called this guy down on the street and I said, look, I love Christians. I grew up with them. But why do you have to be here where people don't want to hear about Christianity? Go to Arkansas where the Clintons are. They love Christianity. Go to a place where people want to hear what you have. Why are you proselytizing here? I calmed down after a little bit, said good night. And I realized that, after I left, the bullhorn came out again and the talk continued. So what can you do? Start a war? Arrest the people? Am I really going to affect goodness in the world by calling the police and tell them, go arrest those guys, they're missionizing? I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to change anything by doing that. And King David says, Sur mirav v'aseh tov. Just go away from evil and do good. Now, the two rabbis that were on the journey and they saw this fellow, go out in the field and do what he did to the young woman, they just said, we're out of here. We got to get away from this. We can't stop it. We can't help it. We're going to leave it. So is that cowardice or is that spiritual wisdom? Sor mirah, go away from evil. Aseh tov, and do good. Because ultimately, only God can deal with evil at the level that it needs to be dealt with. Now, if it's in our face, if we have a chance to stop a terrorist like the young man in Poway, California did, okay, he's a hero. He didn't choose to be a hero. God chose him to be a hero. He didn't choose to be there in that time, in that place, but he happened to be qualified and he happened to have courage and he did the right thing. From the story I read, I've heard different stories, but it's not important. The important thing is to judge fairly in every situation unto itself. Okay. Now we know that this Erev Rav that came out of Egypt, it wasn't just the golden calf they did. They taunted Moses all 39 years in the desert. They taunted him with hitting the rock, which was considered a sin for Moses because God said, just talk to the rock. And the Midrash says that the Erev Rav were heckling him. You heard about heckling? You seen what goes on in universities today when Jews try to get up and talk? Heckling. When it's supposed to be a serious discussion. The heckling is not serious discussion. It's not fair trade of information, of knowledge, of wisdom. It's politicized juvenile behavior designed only to disrupt the true process of freedom of thought and speech. So isn't it interesting that the people that are preaching freedom of speech are actually in cahoots with the people who are denying freedom of speech? Isn't that interesting? And this Erev Rav also, we're told that Datan and Avraham were connected to the Erev Rav, and they're the ones that reported Moses to Pharaoh, that sent Moses into exile when he was 40 years old, that sent him to Midian, and got the whole redemption story going because Moses himself had to go into exile. Of course, good things happened when he went into exile. He met his wife, he met Yitro, he saw the burning bush that gave him his mission. A lot of good things happened. But it was because of this hatred, baseless hatred. Baseless hatred means You have no justification for your actions. When people are suffering, they do terrible things. We know this. And they're judged differently. Now, I don't know if all those hecklers are suffering terribly, to close people down and to make massive security necessary for simple college speeches. When I went to college, anybody could give a speech. Go to Speaker's Corner in London. Be interesting to go there now and see what's going on. Okay, but spiritual profiling, what's that about? Well, the Torah teaches us that we are not allowed to marry people from the countries of Midian, Moab, and Egypt because of what they did to us when we came out of Egypt. So what did Midian and Moab do? Well, we asked to buy water and food. And they didn't just say, no, we don't have enough. No, we're waiting for a delivery. No, we need the food ourselves. They attacked. They started a war. And the war, I'm not sure what the war was about. If the war was just fear, because the Jews had a tremendous reputation after the 10 miracles were done in Egypt. And that reputation, of course, preceded them to the neighboring nations around Canaan at the time. But they went out for war immediately. Now, usually nations attack each other because they want the other nation's resources. It's hard to imagine that they attacked the Jews because the Jews didn't have very many resources. Their main resource was Moses, and the other prophets. Okay, they had some gold, it's true. And we know what they did with some of the gold. That's true. But what were they attacking? Well, if you look at the context, those people knew about the God of Israel. They heard about his miracles, and they were afraid. But still in the mind, they had their own gods. Oh, the Jews, they have their God. Well, I'm Muslim. I have my God. Is it the same God? Well, I call him Allah, and that's it. And the Christian says, oh, the Jews, they have their God. Well, you know what? We have our God now. He's called JC. And many Christians will hold that there is a distinction between God and JC, and many won't. And, it depends on who you talk to. Catholics, Presbyterians, Protestants, there's so many different branches of Christianity, it's hard to follow. And even within them, they're not all consistent. So again, it's this place in the mind that can verbally acknowledge that there's one God. But in my heart, it hurts too much to face that being face to face. So I can disperse that hurt feeling, that fear, into, well, there's also the weather, global warming. There's also politicians. There's also movie stars. They're my gods too. They have power. The billionaires. So what are we dealing with here? Am I allowed to spiritual profile to say, I will marry these people, but I won't marry those people? People call it racism. On the surface, it looks like racism. God says, you can't marry them because of what they did. Now, should I argue with God? God, listen, I really have this wonderful Moabite girlfriend I want to marry. God said, well, what's her name? And he said, Ruth. Okay, Boaz converted Ruth when he was 80 years old. And she converted with a complete heart. Actually, I'm sorry. She did convert earlier when she was the daughter-in-law of Elimelech, who left the country, who was punished, whose 2 sons were punished because of things they did. But Ruth came back a wholehearted convert, and she became the great-grandmother of our greatest king, King David. So it should show us how precious converts are to Hashem, to gods. And the Zohar explains why King David had to have a spark of Moab in him, because he needed to be king. And there had been no true king of Israel yet. And there had been already kings in Moab. And the quality of kingship is a very difficult chair to sit in, because you've got to judge people and show them mercy. The king is the ultimate judge. And he's not sitting in the Supreme Court, and he's not sitting in the Bagatz here in Jerusalem. Not as far as I've heard. Huh. So when we understand this, the spiritual profiling takes on a little different tone. It's profiling not based on your blood type. It's not based on your skin color. It's not even based on who your parents are. It might look like it is, but it's really based on deeds, actions, and about who we attach to. As the Zohar taught us, Mire'im. Re'ah is friend, but Mire'im are friends that do evil. It's not an easy situation. No one wants to get rid of their friends. No one wants to judge their friends. But, if my friend goes out and rapes somebody, do I want to keep hanging out with him? Do I want to learn Torah with him? Do I want to convert him to Judaism? Very difficult situation. And, this is being carried, as always, to the nth degree by certain people. They call the Zionists racists because we put up concrete walls between us and certain Arab villages, like Beit Lechem, like Ramallah, these centers of terrorism. And we're called racist because we put up walls. And terrorist acts have gone down like 90% since those walls were built. Is that racism? Or is that spiritual profiling based on a track record? Now, of course, the situation in the south of the United States right now, and the borders of Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California, etc., it's a pretty serious situation. I've never seen anything like it in my life, where tens of thousands of people are crossing multiple countries to get to the Texas border and slip in overnight. When did that happen? And when did it happen that it was a racist act for the United States to guard their own borders? When did that change? What's going on here? Who changed the social norms that America should have no borders and everybody and anybody can come in anytime they want? Who created that idea? Friends, that's imported. That's imported from people who have a different agenda than the United States. And it's also imported, and it's against the laws of the Torah itself, because we are commanded to have borders. And we're commanded to guard those borders. Because human beings, unfortunately, leave the spectrum of decent behavior. And when you're putting up a border, you're spiritually profiling. You're saying people that come through here, we don't want them. And it's not about their skin and what they wear and what they speak. It's because they're not doing it honestly. If they wanted to come to Israel, they could go to the right places and the right authorities and get the visas, and they could enter. And the same thing could happen everywhere else in the world. But why now are we not? Is that old-fashioned? Is that not working? This whole concept of inclusivity, I think, is behind it. It's a very interesting idea, this inclusivity. We are included together. Well, once you call yourself American, you're included. Once you call yourself Israeli, you're included. You call yourself Jewish, you're included in that group. You call yourself Catholic, you're included in that group. So why do I need this new framework called inclusivity? What is it there to teach me? It reminds me of the affirmative action program, which has been a broad failure in the United States, that made laws that were designed to counteract the effects of racism against black people, to give black people greater opportunity in the United States, when the United States has a pretty bad track record of racism against black people. There's no question about that. And so in an attempt, the government wanted to help the black people educate themselves better, get better jobs, help their families more. Okay, sounds good. But what happened? Well, the system was abused. And without going into details to make anybody look bad, because that's not why we're here. We're here to find the good. And the idea of righting wrong is always good. The idea of righting the wrongs of racism is good, and you don't have to be a Democrat or a Republican to appreciate that. And it feels to me there's some coercion going on from a very high place. There's some coercion going on in the thinking of people. And I think that the previous president of the United States carried this to the nth degree. And his actions speak for themselves. And I might like to joke about his name, but when I'm serious, I don't even want to say his name. Because we don't really know, I don't know who I'm talking about. Is he Christian? Is he Muslim? Is he American? Is he Kenyan? That's not important. What's important is something has changed in the States, and it's also affecting Israel. Like I said, it's not easy stuff to talk about. Because, if you look at the prison populations, you could say, oh, America's racist. It's 3/4 black people are in jail. If you say that, you're already not PC. Now, I don't have the exact numbers. And, I've seen enough documentaries to say something's going on. And do we have mercy for those people in jail? Yes. Right now, it's been the idea of giving them the power of vote from jail. And 75% of Americans are polled to say no. Why should they have the power to vote when they've gone against the society that they're supposed to support, not attack? Is there oppression? Yes. Is there racism? Yes. How do we deal with it? By going to the other extreme? By saying, everybody come in. America was a dominant imperialist power and took advantage of all kinds of banana republics and influenced people and bent their arms and twisted the arms of the Israelis and the Russians and that's all probably to some degrees true. I mean, I'm not a CIA agent, so I couldn't tell you on the inside, but I've read enough to say something's going on. On the other hand, how do you fix that? Do you fix it by removing laws? No. It gets fixed when a leader stands up and takes responsibility and has a proper program for leading the people to a proper program of action to right the wrongs in a way that do not exaggerate and hurt and dominate other people. I have friends that live in various cities, relatives in the States, and they say they have a hard time getting a job because they're white. Now, I'm not there. I don't know if that's true. But when you hear something once, the rabbis teach us very clearly. If you hear something once, it's called Lashon Hara. They're telling you evil speech. They're practicing affirmative action against white people in Washington, D.C., and therefore most of the workers are black. And they get all the jobs. I don't know if that's true. If you hear it once, you say, no, I can't accept that. I need more facts. The second time you hear it, you say, really? I heard that before. I'm not sure. You're still supposed to doubt. The third time the rabbis say, when you hear a story of this nature, you're supposed to say, oh, really? Maybe something is happening. And I'm not blaming black people. I also grew up with black people. And there are many wonderful black people. And they're not all in prison. And some of them are the most educated and wonderful people. But am I allowed to spiritually profile? Am I allowed to ask questions before I marry off my daughters? Before I marry my sons off? Am I allowed to ask questions about people when I have a country club? There are plenty of country clubs that don't let Jews in. Isn't that spiritual profiling? So you see, there's a double standard here, and double standards always get us in trouble. Whether it's on our own personal behavior, or if it's on the level of a country club, or if it's on the level of a government, or on a political party. And all of this leads us back to what the rabbis did. They said, thank God we're not attached to this guy anymore. We're out of here. We're leaving him. We're turning around on the road. We don't care if we have to go from Usha to Lod. We don't care if we're going to go hear new Torah from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the greatest Kabbalist who ever lived. No, we're leaving this road because there's something bad out here and it happened in front of us. So when we see something bad happen, we're supposed to take notice because it happened in my life too. And there's a spark dancing around outside my soul looking for an entry point. And if you see negative things happening in your life, don't be afraid to draw the line. Draw that line. Doesn't mean you go out and become a racist. My mother told me, you marry Jews. We marry Jewish people. Marry a Jewish girl. You know, we were secular as you could be. That's one thing she told me. I'm very happy I married a Jewish girl. Is there a difference? I'm sure there is. Does that mean it's racism? I don't think so. I think we're supposed to make distinctions in this world based on who we are, based on our goals and our ideals and our values and our identities. And those qualities need to be introduced into our decision-making process. And we shouldn't be shooting from the gut and saying, okay, everybody can come in from Mexico, and it doesn't matter if you're from Bahrain or you're from Qatar or you're from Saudi Arabia. It's okay. You're coming through Mexico, it's okay. You know, it's okay. You could come in from Beit Lechem, from Ramallah, or from Gaza. No, it's not okay. The statistics prove it. Am I supposed to lie about the statistics to support my freedom of movement, my freedom of speech? I'm ashamed of what's going on in the universities of America. I went to several universities in America. Thank God I actually got a degree. It took a while. But you know, I'm ashamed of what's going on there. The academics and the intellectuals that I used to sit in class for hours at a time and learning and drinking up their knowledge. And then a Jewish guy comes onto campus and he gets attacked because he's Jewish. Right there, that's enough for me to hit the road. Every person has to make their own decisions according to their own life choices. Okay, so, you know, to end this discussion, this talk, because, you know, it's something that we don't want to talk about too much. It could take us to a darker place. And we don't need to go there because we have the light. We have the Torah. But what the Erev Rav did in a certain way is similar to what that young man did on the road to Lod from Usha. That the Erev Rav, they took something that wasn't theirs. They masqueraded. Like those Messianic Jews that are really Christians, that are walking around Jerusalem and looking like Jews, they're masquerading. And yet they bring something with them that we'd rather not have. And the Erev Rav brought a lot with them that we don't want. And if the Torah didn't teach us what to do about it, and teach Moses too, because Moses was blamed for all that. God called them, Lech, red, ki amcha hishchit. Go down, you Moses, your nation has made the golden calf. And there's a little bit of stealing going on. There's a stealing of identity going on. This identity theft is not a new idea anymore. but it's been going on a long time. If a person wants to be Jewish, be Jewish. Consult the rabbis, go to the Beit Din, do the work, sit and learn, become Jewish. If a person wants to be Christian, be Christian. But why masquerade? Who are they trying to fool? The lonely, the sad, the depressed, the disenfranchised who don't feel attached to anybody? And all of a sudden, this nice guy with a kippah and tzitzit says, come over to my place. And it turns out to be a missionary church. That's just not honest. So I hope all of us receive something from the Zohar and these teachings, because we are here to make proper and healthy boundaries, and then we can really be ourselves. And I can honor all nations, and I can honor all creeds, because I honor myself. But when I try to erase all the boundaries and erase all the categories, what's left? What's left is chaos. And what's left is manipulation and coercion and all the things that we're seeing now that are happening all over the world. So I want to bless everybody to have a good day, to think about these subjects seriously. Who am I? And who am I acting like? I'm sitting here acting like a rabbi, wearing my tefillin, talking Torah. Hopefully I'm acting that way the rest of my day. And if you're a good Christian, be a good Christian. And if you're a Muslim, be a good Muslim. And if you see bad Muslims, get out of there. And if you see bad Christians, get out of there. And the same is true for Jews. Sor mirah v'aseh tov. And when we do good, you'll see God deals with our good. And God can deal with the rest of the world when they don't do good. Okay? If you happen to be in a position of power where you can do something, you can cause legislation to come into power, then it's your responsibility to get educated, to find out the proper way to do things to help your people. Okay, so tomorrow we hope to be here again, and it's the last day of vacation before I go back to yeshiva and the wonderful Beit Midrash in Jerusalem. And, it makes you think, we don't have an armed guard at our yeshiva. There's thousands of synagogues all over Israel that don't have armed guards and metal detectors. And are we not allowed to profile? Think about it. God bless all of you. We'll see you tomorrow.